The church was full. 200 guests, flowers flown in from 3 countries, and a bride who was not the bride at all. He leaned close enough that only she could hear him. "You can take the veil off now," he said. "I know you are not her." Her hands went still on the bouquet. "Say that again," she whispered. "I said I know," he said. "I have known longer than you think." "Then why," she asked, "are we still standing here?" He did not answer right away. He looked out at the guests, at his mother, at the priest still holding the book open, waiting. "Because I am not finished watching you," he said. "Sit down. Smile. We are getting married in 4 minutes." Her breath catches. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered back. "You know I am not her." "I know," he said. "I have known longer than you think." "Then stop this," she said, "right now, before it becomes something neither of us can undo." He leaned closer, almost gentle. "It already is," he said. "It became that the moment you walked in wearing a name that was never yours." 3 days before that morning, none of this had a name yet. Her name was Zamira Hale, and $20,000 sounded like the easiest money she would ever make. Zamira had a rule: never let anyone see you counting your money in public. She broke it once, standing in a parking lot behind a hair salon in the part of the city where rent went up faster than wages did. $400, 2 weeks of double shifts, folded into an envelope that smelled like acetone and cheap coffee. It was supposed to cover her sister's tuition deposit. It covered about a third of it. Zamira was 26. She braided hair on weekdays, tended bar 3 nights a week, and had a talent nobody paid her for, which was reading a room in about 4 seconds flat. She could tell you who was about to start a fight before they knew it themselves. She could tell you which customer was going to stiff you on a tip just by the way they set their glass down. She had one younger sister, Divine, 17, sharp as anything, 1 semester from finishing high school. Zamira raised her since their mother passed. Everything Zamira did, she did with Divine's future sitting on the other side of the ledger. She was good at her jobs. She was better at surviving them. There was a moment, 3 weeks before any of this started, when a regular at the bar left his card open on a tab that should have closed an hour earlier. Nobody would have noticed for days. Zamira closed it out at the correct amount and slid his card back across the counter without a word. Not because she was a saint, because she had one thing in this life that was actually hers, and that was her word. She was not going to trade it for $40 extra from a stranger too drunk to count. That evening, Divine had spread the tuition paperwork across their kitchen table, the deadline circled in red pen so many times the paper had started to tear. "We'll figure it out," Zamira told her, the way she told her most things, with more confidence than she actually owned. "You always say that," Divine said, "and then you figure it out. I don't know how you do it." Zamira looked at the circled date a moment longer than she meant to. "Because I don't have a choice," she said quietly, "and neither do you. So get some sleep. I've got a double tomorrow." She did not sleep much that night either. She lay awake doing the math on rent, tuition, the car repair she had been putting off for 2 months, and came up short every single time. That was the woman standing in the parking lot on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 days before the wedding, when a car with tinted windows pulled up beside her and a woman she had never seen before rolled the window down. "I need a favor," the woman said, "and I can pay for it." Her name was Vivian Ashford. Zamira would learn that name later. In that moment, she only knew the woman's voice, which was smooth in the particular way of someone used to getting what she asked for. "I don't do favors for strangers," Zamira said. $20,000, Vivian said, for 1 afternoon. Zamira did not move. $20,000 was Divine's tuition, her rent for a year, the used car she had been pricing out for 8 months. $20,000 was air she had never once been allowed to breathe freely. "What do I have to do?" she asked. "Wear a dress," Vivian said. "Say a name that is not yours. Stand next to a man for 1 afternoon and let people believe you are someone you are not." "That's called fraud," Zamira said. "That's called acting," Vivian said, and smiled like the word had cost her nothing. Zamira should have walked away right there. She has thought about that moment more times than she can count since. But Divine's tuition letter was sitting on the kitchen table with a deadline circled in red, and $20,000 does not knock on your door twice. Vivian explained it the way people explain things they have already decided you will agree to. There would be a dress, a stylist, a car. Zamira would give her name as Angelina, nothing more. She would not need to speak beyond the ceremony itself. Everything else, Vivian said, was already handled. "You don't have to think," Vivian told her. "You just have to stand there and look like you belong." A small edge in her voice now. "Girls like you blend in easily," Vivian added, almost as a compliment. "Nobody looks twice." Zamira noted the sentence and put it away somewhere to examine later. She had learned a long time ago that insults dressed as compliments were still insults. She said nothing. She took the money. That was the first violation, though Zamira would not have called it that yet. Not an obvious cruelty, just a woman deciding out loud that Zamira's presence in a room was small enough to not matter. As Zamira turned to leave, Vivian's phone rang. Vivian stepped away to answer it, but not far enough. "I told you not to call this number," Vivian hissed into the phone. "3 more days, Marcus. 3 more days, and none of this will matter anymore." Zamira did not know who Marcus was. She only knew that whatever this was, it was bigger than an afternoon in a borrowed dress. What Zamira could not have known standing in that parking lot was the conversation happening on the other end of that call. Marcus was sitting in a rented apartment 3 towns over, the kind of place people live in when they are trying very hard to not be found. "You promised me this would be over by summer," he said. "You said the divorce would be filed months ago." "I can't file it yet," Vivian said, her voice dropping into something closer to panic than command. "If it's on record before the wedding, the Cross family lawyers will find it in a background check. Everything falls apart. Everything I have built for the last 2 years falls apart." "You built it by lying to 2 men at once," Marcus said. "I built it because I was tired of being poor," Vivian said. "You don't understand what it's like to watch people like the Crosses spend more on flowers than we made in a year working double shifts at that warehouse. I am not going back to that life. Not for you, not for anyone." "So what happens to me?" Marcus asked quietly. "You wait," Vivian said. 3 more days. Then I'll have access to more money than either of us has ever seen, and none of this will matter anymore." She hung up before he could answer, and by the time she turned back toward her car, her voice had already smoothed itself back into the version Zamira would meet a moment later. Nobody watching her walk back across that parking lot would have guessed she was a woman standing on the edge of losing everything she had spent years building toward, one lie away from either fortune or ruin. The morning of the wedding moved fast. A car came at 7. A stylist Zamira had never met pinned her hair the way Vivian's photograph had shown her, dabbed color onto her cheekbones, slid a dress over her shoulders that cost more than everything Zamira owned combined. Whenever anyone asks, Vivian's assistant told her in the car, "You say your name is Angelina. Full name only if someone pushes. Otherwise, smile and let people fill in the rest themselves." Zamira nodded. Her stomach had not stopped turning since the parking lot. The church doors opened onto more wealth than Zamira had ever stood inside of. Chandeliers, flowers flown in, someone whispered, from 3 different countries. And at the end of the aisle, a man who was, without exaggeration, the most striking person Zamira had ever seen in her life. Dark suit, steady eyes that did not match the nervous energy of everyone around him. His name, she would learn in the next 60 seconds, was Adrian Cross. The first incident happened before she had even reached him. An older woman, clearly family, leaned toward Adrian at the altar and asked quietly, but not quietly enough, "Is that really her, Adrian? She looks different." "Something feels off, son." "I'm certain, Mom," Adrian said, without looking away from Zamira. "I recognize her voice." Zamira had said exactly 4 words to him in her life at that point. She filed the sentence away. He should not have been certain of anything. The second incident came during the vows themselves, when the priest deviated from the script Vivian's assistant had rehearsed with her, a question about a shared memory, something specific, a trip to a lake house that Zamira knew absolutely nothing about. She felt the panic rise in her chest, like water filling a room with no doors. Before she had to answer, Adrian spoke instead, smooth and unbothered. "We don't need to relive that particular disaster today, do we, sweetheart?" he said, and the room laughed, and the moment passed, and Zamira understood 2 things at once. He was protecting her from exposure, and he was doing it far too easily for a man who was supposedly meeting his bride for the first time in months. The third incident was smaller, and it was the one that stayed with her longest. As they signed the paperwork afterward, alone for a moment behind a curtain, Adrian's hand brushed hers, and he said quietly, "You may take a moment to compose yourself. Nobody would blame a bride to be emotional today. Tomorrow," he added almost like an afterthought, "we will have time for a longer conversation, just the 2 of us." He said it like a promise, or a warning. Zamira could not tell which, and that frightened her more than either possibility on its own. That night, in the guest wing of a house too large for one family, her phone would not stop buzzing. Vivian, again and again. "Do not answer questions about your background," one message read. "If anyone asks where you grew up, say Connecticut." Then, 20 minutes later, "Whatever you do, do not let him see your real ID. Keep it in the bag I gave you. Do not take it out for any reason." Zamira read that last message 3 times. Vivian had never once, in 3 days, asked whether Zamira was safe, whether she was frightened, whether she wanted to walk away. Every message was about control, about covering tracks, about protecting a version of events that had nothing to do with Zamira's well-being at all. She understood, lying awake in an unfamiliar bed in an unfamiliar house, that she had walked into something with a floor much deeper than she had been told, and there was no longer a clean way back out. The 4th incident came the following morning, and it was the one that finally made the danger impossible to explain away. Vivian arrived at the house before breakfast, dismissed the staff from the room with a wave of her hand, and shut the door behind her. "You're doing well," she said, in the tone of someone praising a dog for not chewing the furniture. "Better than I expected, honestly." "I want to talk about when this ends," Zamira said. "You told me one afternoon. It's been 3 days." "It ends when I say it ends," Vivian said, and the warmth dropped out of her voice entirely. "Do you understand what happens if you say one wrong word in that house? Do you understand what a family like that does to people who embarrass them?" "Is that a threat?" Zamira asked. "It's a fact," Vivian said. "You took $20,000 to lie to one of the most powerful families in this city,
If this falls apart, it will not be my name in that police report. It will be yours. Impersonation, fraud, maybe worse depending on how creative their lawyers feel that day. Zamira felt something in her chest go very cold and very still. "You said this was acting," she said quietly. "It was," Vivian said. "Now it's survival, yours and mine both. So smile at dinner tonight and do not, under any circumstance, let that man get you alone long enough to ask real questions." She left without waiting for a response, and Zamira sat on the edge of the bed for a long time afterward, doing a different kind of math than the one she had done in her kitchen 3 nights earlier. She was no longer calculating what $20,000 could buy. She was calculating how much room she had left to get herself out of a room that seemed to be shrinking by the hour. 3 days after the wedding, Zamira found the folder. She had been sent to Adrian's study to retrieve a set of documents, a small, unremarkable errand. The drawer she opened by mistake was not the one she had been asked for. Inside it was a file, and inside the file was her own face. Not a wedding photograph, older ones. Her working a bar shift, her walking Divine to school, a printed page with her legal name at the top, and beneath it, notes, dates, times. Someone had been watching her for weeks before Vivian ever pulled up beside her in that parking lot. She was still standing there, folder open in her hands, when his voice came from the doorway. "You were not supposed to find that yet," Adrian said. "You knew," Zamira said, "before the wedding, before Vivian even approached me, you knew." He did not deny it. "Of course I knew," he said. "I have known everything since before you were ever offered the money." "Then why let it happen? Why marry a stranger on purpose?" He was quiet for a long moment, the kind of quiet that told her the true answer was not one he intended to give her yet. "Because I wanted to see how far she was willing to go to take what isn't hers," he said finally. "And because I wanted to understand what kind of woman would agree to stand in for her." "And which one am I to you?" Zamira asked. "The evidence or the woman?" He looked at her the way a man looks at a question he has not finished answering for himself. "That," he said quietly, "is not something I am ready to tell you yet."
Zamira closed the folder and set it down on the desk between them, and in that motion something shifted. She was no longer asking whether she would get caught. She was asking a far more dangerous question: why a man with this much power would let a stranger walk all the way to the altar beside him and never once move to stop it. Zamira did not run. She thought about it. She stood in that study with a folder of her own life laid bare in front of her, and every instinct she owned told her to take the $20,000 she had already been paid and disappear before anyone noticed she was gone. But running meant Vivian won. Running meant walking away from an answer that belonged to her now, whether anyone had offered it freely or not. So instead, Zamira did the one thing nobody in this house seemed to be expecting from her. She stayed, and she made a decision of her own. "I am not leaving until you tell me the truth," she said. "All of it, not the version that protects you, the real one." Adrian studied her for a long moment. "That is not how this usually goes," he said. "I don't care how it usually goes," Zamira said. "You made a choice when you let that wedding happen. I am making mine now. Either you bring me into whatever this actually is, or I walk out that door and let your mother, your guests, and every person in this family find out exactly how their golden wedding really happened." "That would ruin you as much as it ruins me." "Maybe," Zamira said, "but it would be my choice this time, not yours, not hers." He set the folder down slowly, as if it had suddenly gotten heavier.
"You understand what you're asking for," he said. "Once I bring you into this properly, there's no version of you quietly disappearing back into your old life, not with what you'll know." "I stopped having an old life to disappear into 3 days ago," Zamira said. "You and Vivian both saw to that, so don't offer me an exit that doesn't actually exist. Give me the truth instead." He studied her for a long moment, the calculation behind his eyes finally settling into something that looked almost like respect. "All right," he said, "you've more than earned that much." Something in his expression changed then, some calculation resolving itself behind his eyes. "Fine," he said, "come downstairs tonight. My mother is hosting the family dinner Vivian has been trying to survive for 3 days. It is time everyone in that room learned exactly what has been happening under their roof." That was the moment the story stopped being something that was happening to Zamira and became something she was finally steering. The dining hall was full when Zamira walked in that evening, dressed not in Vivian's borrowed silk, but in her own clothes, the ones she had arrived in 3 days earlier. Adrian stood at the head of the table. "Before dinner begins," he said, "there is something everyone in this family deserves to know. The woman who walked down that aisle 3 days ago is not the woman most of you were told to expect." Gasps around the table. Vivian's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Her name is Zamira Hale," Adrian continued. "She was paid $20,000 to stand in for a bride who could never legally have married me in the first place."
His mother's voice cut through the silence. "What are you talking about, Adrian?" "Ask Vivian," he said, "why the woman standing beside me at that altar could not have been her." Vivian's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. "I don't know what he's talking about," she said, but her voice had lost its usual smoothness. "Then perhaps," Adrian said, "we should ask your husband." The room went still. A man Zamira had never seen before stepped through the doorway behind Adrian's security, visibly uncomfortable, clearly summoned. "Marcus Reyes," Adrian said, "married to Vivian Ashford for the last 3 years. A marriage she never dissolved, because dissolving it would have meant losing access to the very fortune she was trying to marry into a second time." "Vivian, quieter now. Adrian, please, let me explain." "You had months to explain," he said. "Instead, you paid a stranger $20,000 to hide a lie you built for yourself." Zamira watched the room reorganize itself in real time. Adrian's mother's hand pressed flat against her chest. Marcus staring at his wife like a man seeing her clearly for the first time in years. Vivian, who had spent 3 days controlling every detail of a stranger's presence in this house, now unable to control a single thing happening around her. "I did it for us," Vivian said, her voice breaking. "For this family, for the business. I only wanted—" "You wanted my name on a marriage certificate long enough to make a claim on everything I own," Adrian said. "That was never about us. It was never even about me." "This is insane," Vivian said, standing now, her chair scraping back against the floor. "Marcus and I have barely spoken in a year. That marriage means nothing." "It means everything," Adrian said. "It means every claim you tried to make on my family's name was built on a lie you never bothered to correct, because correcting it meant losing your leverage." Marcus, quietly to Vivian, "You told me you loved me once. Was any of that true, or was I leveraged too?" Vivian did not answer him. She looked instead at Adrian, her composure finally cracking all the way through. "I did everything right," she said. "I planned every detail. I controlled every variable." "You controlled everything except the one thing that mattered," Adrian said. "You never once asked whether the woman you paid to stand in for you deserved better than being used as a shield for your mistakes." His mother finally spoke, her voice cold in a way Zamira had not heard from her before. "Get her out of my house," she said, "and get her husband a lawyer, because clearly he needs one more than she does." Vivian looked around the table one last time, searching for a single face that might still be on her side, and found none. Even the staff, who had spent 3 days following her instructions to the letter, now stood very still, very quiet, very carefully looking at nothing at all. Zamira stood at the edge of the room and said nothing at all. She did not need to. For the first time in 3 days, the truth was speaking for itself, and every eye that had once measured her worth in second-hand whispers was now fixed somewhere else entirely. The house was quiet again by midnight. Zamira found Adrian standing on the balcony off the room she had been given 3 days earlier, the folder from his study now sitting on the table between them. "You could still walk away," he said, without turning around. "The money is yours regardless. Nobody will stop you at the gate." Pause. "I know," she said. He turned to face her then. "So why are you still here?" "Because you owe me an answer," she said. "Why me? Out of everyone Vivian could have paid, why did you let it be me?" "That," he said quietly, "is a longer story than tonight has room for." Zamira studied him for a moment and then nodded slowly, and for the first time since the parking lot 3 days earlier, the decision in front of her belonged entirely to her.
"I'm not leaving because you're keeping me here," she said. "If I stay, it will be because I chose to stay long enough to hear that story properly." "Then stay," he said, "not as a favor to me, as your own decision." "All right," she said, "but you're telling me everything, eventually." "Eventually," he agreed. She looked out at the city lights below the balcony for a moment, the same skyline that had felt like someone else's world 3 days earlier. "For what it's worth," he said, watching her, "none of what happened tonight changes the fact that you never once asked me for more than what you were owed. Not the money, not an explanation you hadn't earned yet. Vivian spent months trying to take things that weren't hers. You never asked for anything you didn't already deserve." "That's the nicest thing anyone in this house has said to me all week," Zamira said. "A low bar," he said. She let herself smile, just slightly, the first real one in 3 days. "Don't get used to it," she said. "I still want that story." "You'll get it," he said. "I promise." Vivian lost the marriage she never should have attempted, the fortune she tried to steal, and the family she spent months trying to buy her way into. Zamira lost nothing but the version of herself who once believed $20,000 was the most valuable thing anyone would ever offer her. Everything that happened after that night is a different story, one about what a man with everything actually wants, and why he waited 3 days at an altar to find it standing in a borrowed dress. If you were in Zamira's position, would you have taken the money and disappeared the moment you found that folder, or stayed to find out exactly what he wanted with you? Tell me in the comments, and if you want to know why Adrian really chose her, subscribe, because that story is coming next.